Hello everybody, I'm Sylleaf. This will be part 1 of a one-shot entitled Idiots in Bloom by Chloe Oodles on AO3. Summary. After the war, Katsuki and Izuku have been closer than ever. Everything is great until Izuku ends up with Hanahaki. Then Katsuki ends up with Hanahaki. Surely they're not suffering for each other, right? It was a good day. Izuku woke up early, feeling rested and refreshed. He couldn't even remember having any dreams the night before, which was rare to say the least. Nightmares tended to plague his mind ever since the war had ended. Now he had time and energy to grab a real breakfast. Kachan would be proud. Kachan. Izuku couldn't help the small smile that formed on his face at the thought of the grumpy blonde. He loved to nag Izuku about taking care of his own health, especially since they both got out of the hospital. The two had already made huge leaps in repairing their relationship throughout their first year at UA. But after finally defeating All for One, though, there was an even bigger shift. They were closer than ever, and things were great. If Izuku thought he was in love before, he was certainly head over heels now. Now, Izuku even dared to hope that Kachan might just have some feelings towards him as well. Izuku went through his morning routine at a leisurely pace. He looked in the mirror and was delighted to see his perpetually wild hair actually looked good. Could anything dampen his mood? He didn't think so. Leaving his room, Izuku headed to the commutual dorm kitchen. He was sure to see Kachan there. They always met up before walking to class. These days, it was rare for them not to be in each other's presence. He smiled and greeted fellow classmates on his trip to the kitchen, saving his brightest good morning for the object of his affections. Surely enough, Katsuki stood in front of the stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. Izuku felt his stomach grumble as he walked up next to him. "Hi, Kachan," Izuku greeted suddenly. "How are you this morning?" "What's got you all chipper?" Katsuki tried to sound uninterested, but a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "You're not usually this energetic at ass o'clock in the morning." Izuku shrugged, smile never faltering. "Just a good day, I suppose." Katsuki let out a non-committal grunt before splitting the food he was cooking between two bowls and shoving one into Izuku's chest. "Eat. I don't need you actually dying when I destroy you in training today." Katsuki acted casual, yet refused to meet Izuku's eyes. Izuku let out a small gasp, stars practically glowing in his large emerald eyes as he gratefully accepted the bowl. Katsuki always made sure Izuku ate breakfast, even if it was something simple, yet it never ceased to make his heart beat erratically. "Thank you!" Izuku cheered. He immediately started chowing down, nearly inhaling the food. "For the love of..." Katsuki shook his head. "At least sit down." Izuku just looked up with a sheepish smile, rice clinging to his chin. "Dork," Katsuki chuckled. "Make sure to wash your bowl when you're done." Izuku nodded, knowing better than to answer with a full mouth. Katsuki had already scolded him plenty of times for that. The two finished their breakfast in a comfortable silence, not even bothered by their classmates as they ambled about. Izuku relished days like this. There was no rush, no need to scarf down food, or sprint to class. They could take their time, and Izuku could enjoy every second spent with his beloved Kachan without anxiety ruining it. They walked to their homeroom leisurely, not paying any mind to the other students milling about. Most of their friends were known to show up closer to the start of class anyway, but by the time they took their seats, only a handful of others were in the room. "What do you think we'll eat for lunch today?" Izuku asked casually, wanting to keep their conversation going. "Dunno. Haven't thought about it yet," Katsuki answered. Izuku was about to make a half-joking comment about how it would surely be something spicy, but was interrupted before he could utter another word. "Hey, Bakugo." Shoji approached the blonde. It was clear that he was hesitant to interrupt the pair with whatever it was they were doing. He didn't talk to either of them very much, so it must have been something fairly important. Katsuki looked up at his multi-limbed classmate, raising an eyebrow, but not turning his attention from his food. First year from General Studies asked me to give you this. Shoji continued, holding out an envelope. The hell is it? Katsuki scowled. He didn't know any first years in General Studies, and he sure as shit wasn't interested in anything from one. I'm not sure, Shoji answered as he watched Katsuki tear the envelope into pieces to get what was inside. She just said she knew I was in the same class as you, so she figured I could get it to you. Thanks, I guess. Katsuki grumbled, leading Shoji to walk away before things got any more awkward. What is it, Kachan? Izuku asked with the tilt of his head. He had a feeling he already knew, as the thought made his stomach drop. It's stupid, Katsuki answered. Some girl wants me to meet her by the track during lunch. Oh, Izuku said quietly. I wonder what she wants. I don't, Katsuki snorted. I don't know her, and I don't care. Kachan, you should at least see what it is, Izuku scolded his friend against his better judgment. He didn't want Katsuki to go either, but it would be rude to not at least find out what she had to say. What if it's something important? I doubt it is, Katsuki rolled his eyes. But I'll go if it means you'll stop nagging me. But I'm only giving her 30 seconds before I leave. Izuku felt a little better that Katsuki really didn't seem uninterested. That didn't completely erase his worries, though. There were very few things that a letter asking to talk in person could imply. Izuku just hoped that with all of his heart that it wasn't the most obvious possibility. After that, there wasn't time to talk about anything else. More of their classmates had arrived, wanting both his and Katsuki's attention. And then class began. Any negative thoughts left swirling in Izuku's head faded away as they were replaced with his lessons for the morning. By lunchtime, Izuku had completely forgotten he was ever upset. That was until Katsuki reminded him. Guess I better go see what this chick wants, Katsuki grumbled as he stood from his desk. Wanna come with me? It won't take long. Oh, yeah, sure, Izuku responded. He didn't really think he could eat while Katsuki was talking to some girl anyway. No conversation was had as they headed for the track, other than Katsuki's irritated grumbling and Izuku's half-hearted attempts to placate him. Katsuki stood at the edge of the track closest to where he had come from. No one was there waiting for him, but several students milled about. Probably some shitty prank, Katsuki scoffed. Can we go back now? Izuku admonished. Just as Katsuki was about to protest, a girl approached. She was petite, with long silvery blue hair and blemish-free tanned skin. She was pretty, beautiful even. I'll, be over there by the bleachers, Izuku said before scampering away. He wanted to stay close so that he and Katsuki could walk back together, as well as to be ready in case his assistance was needed for any reason. He knew it wouldn't, but it helped to tell himself that. Izuku watched the pair, trying to stamp down the nervous feeling rising in his gut. He shouldn't look. He should give them privacy. He knew that. Something about his stupid, self-sabotaging brain, however, kept his eyes locked. The girl looked nervous as she began to speak. She was too far away for Izuku to hear what she was saying, but he didn't need to. Not when she clenched her fists at her side and bowed deeply in front of Katsuki. At first, Katsuki looked passive. He held his usual cool and collected demeanor, arms crossed over his broad chest. A brief look of shock crossed his face as the girl bowed, but was quickly replaced with a smirk. A smirk? What was she saying that made Katsuki happy? Just when Izuku thought his heart couldn't sink any lower, Katsuki reached out and touched the girl. Katsuki had never been a touchy-feely person, and he would never do something as friendly as softly ruffling someone's hair. At least that was what Izuku thought up until that moment. Izuku wanted to run, he wanted to cry, he wanted to disappear. He wanted anything but to stay there, watching his secret crush, the one and only person he had ever loved, clearly accepting the confession of the girl he had never even seen before. He tried to move, he really did, but his legs seemed rooted in place. The girl left with her head held high, and Katsuki turned back towards Izuku. "Ready to go get some food?" Katsuki asked when he had gotten close. Izuku stumbled over his words, fighting against the tightening of his throat. "I have to go to the bathroom." And then he ran off. "Izuku!" Katsuki called out after him, his tone laced with concern. Izuku ran until he was back at his dorm. He didn't turn the light on when he entered, choosing to crawl straight into his bed and bury himself in his blanket, neglecting to even remove his uniform. He was surely going to get a scolding for skipping the rest of the day's classes, but he couldn't find it in his broken heart to care. Katsuki had a girlfriend. Just when Izuku was starting to think that his feelings just might not be one-sided, he was proved wrong. Katsuki liked someone else. Any chance Izuku had was lost. Katsuki was happy. All Izuku wanted was Katsuki's happiness, and he should be glad that the blonde found it, but he never expected it to be at the expense of his own suffering. Burying his face into his pillow, Izuku finally let himself cry. He cried until his pillowcase was soaked with tears and snot and drool. Hiccuping sobs racked his entire body as he cried his heart out. His throat hurt and his lungs burned. The first cough came as no surprise. With the hyperventilating caused by his wailing, Izuku must have inhaled some saliva. He coughed again and again, struggling to rid his airways of the irritation. Instead of letting up, however, the coughing only seemed to intensify. It had gotten so intense that Izuku was afraid he would be sick in his bed. That fear grew when he felt something rise in his throat. Izuku covered his mouth with his hands. A couple more hacks and something came up. It wasn't bile. In fact, it was something Izuku had never experienced before. It was something he never even considered might have happened to him. Yet, here it was. In Izuku's hands were a few small petals, partially covered in blood. He didn't know what type they were. They were magenta, darker towards the base and lighter towards the end. The ends had a divot in the middle, almost making them look heart-shaped. He stared down at them in shock. Had he really just coughed those up? He had heard of Hanahaki disease before, but had never seen it happen to anyone. It was said to be extremely rare, definitely rare enough that he never considered the possibility of catching it. Izuku shoved down his fears. He could get through this. He would do his research before letting himself panic. Surely the internet would have all the answers he needed. He just needed to clean himself up before he could look. Face washed and clothes changed, Izuku sat at his desk and opened his laptop. Hanahaki had countless pages in web results, but they all seemed to say the same thing. There were only 3 ways Izuku could rid himself of the disease. The first would be to have his love requited. He let out a sad snort at that, like that would ever happen. The second was a surgery that sounded expensive, painful, and would make him forget all his memories with the object of his affections. The ideas of losing his memories with Katsuki sounded worse than death in Izuku's opinion, which led him to the last option, literal death. Izuku didn't know what to do. It was early on, so he might have some time to make his decision. But how could he? This wasn't even something he could talk about. He usually told Katsuki everything, but that wasn't an option here. He couldn't tell any of his friends for fear that they would tell Katsuki. He didn't even think he could even bear to tell All Might. He wasn't sure what caused him to hold on to the petals he had coughed up. Morbid curiosity, probably. No matter the reason, though, they sat on a paper towel in the front of Izuku, the blood carefully washed off. He idly wondered what type of flower they even came from. Izuku liked flowers, or he used to, but he didn't know much about them. Searching magenta flowers was about as helpful as Izuku expected. Most of what he saw were sunflowers, which was definitely not right. He tried to refine his search several times until he was pretty sure he finally found what he was looking for. Japanese primrose. A beautiful flower if Izuku had seen it in any other light. It was pretty amazing to think that such a thing could have come from inside his lungs. Probing deeper, Izuku found out that Japanese primroses supposedly symbolized first love and admiration. The result seems so obvious. Katsuki was definitely his first love. They had known each other since they were small children, and Izuku hardly noticed anyone else. He had probably loved him right from the start, even if he didn't know it. The admiration was also a given. Katsuki was amazing, and Izuku couldn't think of anyone he looked up to more, including All Might himself. Izuku closed his laptop and stood up. It wouldn't do him any good to sit there and mope. He needed to get his mind off things while he still could. He looked in the mirror to make sure he looked somewhat presentable before heading down to the common area of the dorm. Alright everybody, that concludes part 1 of Idiots in Bloom. I hope you guys enjoyed. Before the video ends, I'm going to read off some of the notes the author has. It's just the flowers and their meanings. So the yellow ones, or the camellias, mean longing. The gardenia, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the white ones mean secret love. The Japanese primrose, or magenta, the one Izuku has, is first love or admiration, and the roses, or red, means love or in love. Please make sure you check out the author of this work, as they deserve the credit. I linked their AO3 account in the description, so it'll be really easy to find. But that is all. Thank you for listening.